And also in our engagements with the stakeholders, we also want to drive it influencing a culture shift within the public sector. And also, should it require, then we would use the provisions that have been put into the Public Audit Act as they pertain to enforcement. And the team will touch as well on the items such as material irregularities later on in the presentation. Chairperson, on the next slide, we just depict as part of the new strategy, the messaging that we are driving. And one of the areas that we are also looking at is in terms of the accountability ecosystems, which speaks to the many roles and the players or the role players that we have within the public sector. Yeah. Those that provide leadership and direction, being the officials, your internal audit units with the audit committee, senior management in the various departments, the directors general and the accounting officers in the various departments, and also the MECs and the premier. Those are the leadership and the decision makers, and to really say that they have a role to play in what we are also driving at in terms of shifting the culture within the public sector and improving outcomes and improving the lived realities of our people. And then also the ones that play a role in the support, intervention, and oversight, being such the coordinating ministries and also the portfolio committees that we have. It is really to say that each of us or each of the role players has got a mandate and a role to play in the ecosystem, and that we should always drive at that and holding each other accountable as well. In the next slide, Chairperson, it's really to recap on the previous year's message or messaging, which spoke to leadership that they should enforce a culture of accountability to realize a further improvement. And here, Chairperson, we saw that credible financial statements and performance reports are crucial to enable accountability and transparency. Better management of public funds through good financial health. Also around the area of SCM, the wins again there around improving on checklists and alignment of policies to the SCM prescripts and legislation, and also that through the instilling of basic discipline and processes, we would be able to prevent the reoccurrence of material irregularities, and that sustainable improvements are possible where there is combined assurance by all role players, which speaks also to the previous slide. Chairperson, in the next slide, we then cover at a high level the audit outcomes and since the previous year, and showing the improvements that we have seen in the 2021-2022 audits, where we've seen some moves from qualified with findings onto unqualified with findings, but also moves from the unqualified with findings to unqualified with no findings, being the clean audits. So overall, there has been an improvement where 4 auditees have moved up from in the various opinions that are there covered. On the next slide, Chair is then looking at the various auditees that have moved. So the previous one is just a graph, and here we are now detailing the auditees that have moved, where we've got arts and culture that has moved to an unqualified with findings from a qualified opinion. We still have 2 that remained with qualified opinions with findings, and then we also had 3 that have moved from unqualified with findings to unqualified with no findings, being the clean audits, which was the Office of the Premier, Human Settlements, and Agriculture. Chair, on the following slide, we then also are looking at the messaging in the current year, where we are saying that all role players in the accountability ecosystem must set a tone of zero tolerance for transgressions and continue to institutionalize the preventative controls to achieve further sustainable improvements. Apologies, Chair. And really what we are saying, Chairperson, is that what we saw is that effective oversight, good governance and stability in key management positions were quite instrumental in bringing about an improvement in the overall outcomes as we see. We also identified that the stability in the key positions and finance units, coupled with the diligent and robust reviews of financial and performance reports, also saw an improvement in the credibility of the financial statements and performance reports that are submitted to the AG for auditing. There was also improvements noted within the SCM function, with improvements in the monitoring of controls over compliance with SCM and other legislation, and these through institutionalizing the key preventative controls and also the upskilling of the officials that sit within these functions. And as also you will see in the detail that's going to be presented, key service delivery departments being health and transport remain qualified, and education retained its unqualified opinion with findings. We still have challenges with respect to credibility of performance reports from these departments, and also the irregular expenditure, where transport and health account for the majority of those. We'd also want to emphasize the importance of the coordinating ministries insofar as the role that they play in supporting the departments and leading in setting the tone and driving a culture of accountability, transparency, and good governance. On the following slide, Chairperson, just to touch briefly on the irregular expenditure. As said in the previous slide, in terms of what we have found, the improvements, we see again here that we've had improvements in terms of the irregular expenditure. We've seen a decline over the past 4 years. Yes, the number is still high, but we are seeing an improvement. We're 23% reduction from the previous from the 2018-2019 financial year, and they're just depicting the highest contributors to the irregular expenditure being transport, health, and public works. And my colleagues will touch on the details in terms of the reason or the reason behind the irregular expenditure that was incurred in the various departments. On the following slide, Chair, is to look at the overview in terms of the material irregularity. As you may be aware that from the financial year 2018-2019, or from that cycle to date, we have implemented the provisions or the regulations with regards to it, well, contained in the PAA as they pertain to material irregularity. And so far we have reported or notified the various accounting officers of 17 material irregularities, and in that table it then gives a split in terms of the material irregularities that 12 of them were relating to payments for goods or services that were not delivered or not received, or of poor quality, or not in line with the contracts, or where ineligible beneficiaries received them. And then the other material irregularity pertains to payments that are not made on time or not made at all, that have resulted in interest. And then the others relating to procurement and the non-compliance with regards to SCM prescripts. And overall, the estimated financial loss from these material irregularities is at 566.5 million. On the following slide is then the breakdown of, because some have been closed, we've got 4 that have been resolved or closed, where the accounting officer or authority has implemented the relevant actions to ensure that there is no reoccurrence. But we do have some that are still open, but we have assessed in terms of the actions of the accounting officer and have found that some are still in progress of 6 MIs, but where we have found that there's lack of progress in terms of the implementation of those and the response, we've then referred those for further investigation to another public body as allowed by the PAA or the Public Audit Act. Chairperson, in terms of our focus going forward on the next slide. Sorry, Winile, if you can move us. Thank you very much. This slide really just talks to the focus that, or at least what we'll be focused on going forward around the coordinating ministries. And these are conversations that we have started to have with the various departments, and they are really around looking at the implementation of their mandate and the effectiveness of the initiatives that are rolled out. If you look at COCTA, for an example, where there are a number of initiatives, probably COCTA and the Provincial Treasury, where there are a number of initiatives that are rolled out in support of the departments or local governments, that we will be looking into those in terms of their impact or their effectiveness, rather than just looking at that we have initiatives in place. So going forward, that is going to be our focus, that we see these coordinating ministries also looking at what impact their initiatives that they're rolling out either to departments as support or to the municipalities, what impact that those are making. Some of the conversations we are having is that, yes, we are seeing improvements at the provincial department levels, but we need to see similar, or at least what impacts then those improvements are also filtering through or making with regards to municipalities. Are they making an impact that we are going to see improvements in the audit outcomes of the municipalities? And from the portfolio committee standpoint is also to also be looking at the impact and really driving their engagements with the municipalities or with the department with that message of what impact these are making in the support of departments or local government. So we'll be paying a close eye on those in terms of the coordinating ministries. Chairperson, that is from my side on a very high level. And through you, Chairperson, and per your permission, is to ask the Nukabiso to take us on the detail where you would then see in terms of the qualification areas and also the irregular expenditure details of some of the departments that I have mentioned, but also on the improvements of the departments that have moved, all the good stories that have moved from the various levels of opinion to improved levels. Thank you very much, Chairperson and Committee.
Thank you very much, Nomalungelo. We'll move to Kabiso. And colleagues, I just want to say that if you have any questions or matters that you wish to raise, we'll take those at the end of the presentations. Thank you, Kabiso.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and Norma. Yes, colleagues, then moving over to the slide, basically, we're saying that health and education continue to experience challenges around reliability of performance information. This was due to their manual processes of large manual processes, basically. And we couldn't get support by reliable evidence. Basically, on the table that shows for performance objectives, we look at usefulness and reliability for health. we had issues around the reliability of the information, and for education as well, we had challenges around the reliability of the information. On the next slide, Winile. Yeah, on the next slide, Honorable Chairperson, for arts and culture, we also had challenges around for arts and culture and for Nature Conservation Board, where we're saying that there were new findings that were identified during the financial year. The auditees, on the new slide, because we look at three types of audit opinions, we look at the financial statements, we look at the compliance and performance. For compliance, these were the issues that we identified on these various departments. For health, we had issues around material misstatements on the financial statement. We had issues on the unauthorized irregular expenditure. We also had issues on the expenditure management, consequence management, and strategic planning on the performance information and procurement. For community and safety, we had issues on the consequence management. For social development, we had issues around unauthorized expenditure and consequence management. For transport, Honorable Chairperson, we had a number of items relating to the financial statements, the material adjustments. We had unauthorized, I think, transport was one of the highest contributors in terms of the irregular expenditure. We also had issues around following up on the consequence management, whereby we found that there's a number of irregular expenditure items that are not being followed up. And we also had issues around expenditure as well. But some of them were subsequently corrected during the audit. On the next slide, we need we further highlight the various departments that we had issues with in terms of non-compliance, being education, where there was unauthorized expenditure. We had issues around expenditure management and consequence management. But we also indicate that for procurement management for education, we feel that they did address the prior findings, which is a positive. For public works, we had issues around unauthorized expenditure and consequence management and procurement management. For arts and culture had been previously qualified due to expenditure management, but during the current year, you would have noted that they did improve and went to an unqualified with findings. And for arts and culture, we had issues around material misstatements on the financial statements. We had issues around unauthorized irregular expenditure. We had issues around expenditure management as well. For Itala, we had a new finding that we identified around unauthorized expenditure. For Itala Development Finance, we had issues around the adjustments on the financial statements. For KZN Nature Conservation, we had issues around irregular, unauthorized expenditure and procurement management. And on the next slide, basically, Honorable Chairperson, is where we are just indicating what were the main reasons of the qualifications on the departments that were qualified. For transport, we're saying that the outcome of transport remained unchanged at a qualified opinion, although management were able to address the qualifications on accrued departmental revenue and expenditure. The breakdown in internal controls to record capital commitments resulted in the qualification. Basically, they had changed some systems in terms of how they are recording their commitments. So we felt that at the end we couldn't do proper reconciliations of that, and we saying that the instability in key positions of the STM director and the CFO and the suspension of senior officials did hamper efforts to strengthen internal controls. The qualification area for transport was around capital commitments as indicated. For a predetermined objectives, we're saying that there were issues in terms of the number of square meters of surface road rehabilitated. We're saying that the reason provided for the variance between planned targets and the reported achievement did not agree with the supporting documents that they've given us. And on the next slide, we need for transport, honorable members, we did identify, I believe, 3 material irregularities, but we reported 2 on this audit outcome, whereby this first one, it was payments made to a contractor for suspension of work. The department on that date awarded a tender of that number to the value of 85 million for the construction of concrete barrier wall between Umkanyabude and Mozambique. The department did not ensure that it had an approved environmental management program. Basically, to summarize this, what had happened, they awarded a contract, and in order to implement that contract, there was some certification that they needed to get. The fact that they didn't get that certification before starting to commence with the contract, then the supplier charged them a standing fee of an amount of 2.3 million. So where we said no, when you do proper planning, you should have known that you should have gotten the certification before you started the contract, because the contractor ended up charging them a standing fee. On the next slide, we go on further discussing the other material irregularity, which was around award of contract to bidders that did not score the highest points. And we're saying that the department on the date awarded a tender for the provision of professional consulting services to area offices for a period of 3 years for each of the 33 offices that covers the entire KZN province to bidders that did not score the highest points. The prices charged by the bidders who were awarded the tenders were higher than the prices of the bidders that scored the highest points. So basically, we're saying that there is a potential financial loss because the tender was awarded to tenderers that did not score the highest point. On the next slide, we need. So basically, these were the 2 material irregularities. We had raised 3 for Department of Transport, but on the third one, we felt that the department is taking appropriate steps to stop the irregularity. And for Department of Health, these were the areas that we had issues with, which led to their qualification. We said that health remained unchanged at a qualified opinion for the past 5 years. Leadership did not exercise adequate oversight and monitoring over asset management and the identification and recording of irregular expenditure. We're saying that management did not implement a proper document management and record-keeping systems to ensure that complete, relevant, and accurate information is accessible. I think, Honorable Chairperson, the main issue that we have with the Department of Health is that at this era, we feel that they are still too manual in terms of how they keep things. The qualification areas were around movable, tangible capital assets and minor assets. We're saying that we were unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence for movable, tangible capital assets and minor assets due to the status of accounting records. We were unable to confirm the assets by other alternative means, and as a result, we were not able to verify the number on the financial statements, the amount reflected on the financial statements. On the next slide, we need We further go on indicating the additional qualification area for the Department of Health, which was around irregular expenditure. We're saying that we were unable to determine whether any adjustments were necessary to the irregular expenditure stated at 16.17 billion in note number 26 of the financial statements. And we also had issues around goods and services, where we're saying that during the 2021 financial year, we were unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence that payments were made in respect of goods and services that were received by the department. And on the next slide, Minile, we further go on highlighting the areas of qualification, saying that they were also qualified on accruals and payables that were not recognized. We're saying that the department did not adequately record accruals and payables as required by that paragraph in Chapter 2 of the Modified Cash Standards due to inadequate systems and processes to account for the disclosure. And we also raised an emphasis of matter on the audit report, where we were indicating that there was uncertainty relating to the future outcome of litigation. The department is a defendant in a number of litigation matters relating to medical negligence and claims against the state amounting to 17 billion. This is one area that, as the office, we are also looking into, because we are seeing a rise in this number of the claims that is being claimed from the department. On the next slide, we need for health, honorable members, we had a material irregularity that for radiology equipment contracts that were awarded to bidders that did not score the highest point in the evaluation process. I think it's almost similar to what we had discussed on transport, whereby contracts were awarded to suppliers that did not score a highest point. On the next slide, we need this is another one for health, which was the procurement of sanitizers, detergent at prices higher than permissible. I think for this one, honorable members, there was a standard price that was set during the COVID for sanitizers and other PPE items. But on this one, we're saying that the department ordered 40,000 units of 1 liter hand sanitizers at 143 per unit. The total order came up to 5.7 million. The department did not comply with that paragraph of the instruction, which stated that institutions may approach any other supplier to obtain quotes and may procure from suppliers on condition that prices are equal or lower than the prices in Annex A. But basically, it was a matter of they acquired these sanitizers at an above cost than what we.
Kabiso, you are on mute. Kabiso, we can't hear you.
Apologies for that, colleagues. I just got disconnected, but I am back now. On this slide, colleagues, we just indicating the improvements in the audit outcomes, which the government did improve. For the Office of the Premier, which had been previously qualified on the previous year, we saw an improvement by them obtaining a clean audit. We're saying that the Office of the Premier improved to a clean audit in the current year due to diligent application of key controls through independent reviews, supervision, monitoring, as well as the robust oversight that was exercised throughout the year. That's the common criteria that we are seeing in terms of those clients that are moving up to clean audits. They don't wait till year end. They do things throughout the year. We also saw an improvement around agriculture, where they obtained a clean audit as well. The department moved from unqualified with findings in the previous 2 financial years to a clean audit outcome in the current year. We also saw an improvement in human settlements, whereby we're saying the improvement is attributable to leadership, creating a strong control environment. And on the next slide, we need also an improvement with regards to arts and culture. Basically, they had some issues around expenditure in the prior year, which they were able to correct during the current year, whereby they moved to an unqualified audit as well. The audit outcome improved from qualified to an unqualified, with findings due to implementation and monitoring of the action plan. And on the next slide, we need. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Members. That was the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kabiso. Colleagues, I'm wondering whether we should take the next presentation as well and then have questions on everything, or do you want to raise issues now? There are issues to be raised, but I'll be guided by you. Colleagues, I'm not getting any indication from you. Okay, I think let's proceed. Who was that, sorry?
Okay, it's me. I think we can proceed.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Honorable de Klerk. Right, let's carry on with the next presentation on the KZN Flood Relief Report, and then we'll take discussion and questions thereafter.
Honorable Chair, thank you. It's Mirusha. I'm going to take the members through the real-time audit in terms of the recent floods that we've had in KZN and the outcome of those findings. Winnie, we can go to the slide on that explains. I think we can skip the slide. We can pause here. So just to bring all the members up to speed in terms of what is a real-time audit. It's an early audit, not a pre-audit, and our independence remains intact. Our role is to enhance public confidence and ensure that funds are used for the intended purpose and value for money is achieved. The 3 main components of what we expect is prevention, detection, reporting. So if there's something we find, we'd like for management to then improve controls to prevent further findings occurring. Detection is to assist management if something was not detected, and then to report these findings to all stakeholders that have an interest such that there's enhancement of the message and further prevention and detection that will take place in terms of how the message is received. We do with real-time audits collaborate with civil society organizations and investigative institutions in terms of assessing risk areas, as well as what is the outcome of the findings and whether there needs to be referrals in terms of the investigative institutions. So the scope for the flooding that took place in April and also a few days in May, the focus was on KZN and Eastern Cape, and the initiative selected for auditing was the highest risk of non-delivery, harm to flood victims, fraud and mismanagement of funds. We did not test 100%, but samples were selected in the areas that we focused on. The focus areas was procurement and contract management, as well as payments, the economical, efficient, and effective delivery of infrastructure projects in terms of value for money, and the effectiveness of monitoring and oversight. The next slide. So also just to brief the committee, I'm not focusing just on the KZN specific focus areas, but in terms of what the national departments also contributed in terms of the flood relief, as this report was tabled with the portfolio committee at national level, and therefore this is the report that was shared with him. So I'm sharing the same report, but we will highlight what is specific to KZN in terms of the detail that comes through in the rest of the slides. So you'll see that the focus areas or what was selected in terms of the biggest spend was social relief, water and sanitation with respect to water tankering services, getting water to people, repairs to government buildings, schools with respect to the mobile units that was to be made available in KZN, and with respect to human resources was the temporary units that were constructed, or the TRUs that were to be made available as immediate relief to the flood victims that were displaced and then housed in community halls, etc. So those were the focus areas. In terms of the colors and on the extreme right-hand side, it just shows the budget spent by national, provincial, and municipal level, as well as the actual spending that was there. So for an example, the mobile units, 18.83 million was made available at that point in time. This was between the periods of April to end of July, and 18.83 million was spent. If you look at human settlements, the budget was 516 million. However, at the cutoff for this audit, which was end of July, only 33.14 million was spent. So also the time period for this audit is from the time the floods took place, which was Easter weekend, which was in April, all the way to government's response at the end of July. The reports that follow through in terms of additional work on the flood relief will fall into future reports, but for this one, the cutoff was end of July, just to give context to the budget and the spend. In terms of the slide, it also talks about what we would look at in the next couple months, and that's what we're currently busy with, and that's to do follow-ups in terms of the findings we had at human settlements, to look at if there's any further initiatives, and there may be a current initiative of building materials under human settlements that we're looking at. In terms of the school infrastructure, is to look at the damage to schools, as well as follow up on the findings from this report, and to look at the roads infrastructure and the repairs made there. But that will be outside of the KZN scope, meaning our BU, but will be handled by our national BUs in terms of the SANRAIL and any other national initiatives, as well as the involvement of KZN Transport. With respect to KZN Health, there was a budget in terms of the assessment put forward of the damage to clinics. If we can just go back to the previous slide, please. Thank you. In terms of the damage to clinics and hospitals, however, we are waiting for the progress reports from the department before we start any work here. What we have noticed is the department has been spending on more operational items, which is laundry services, catering, etc. But the actual infrastructure repairs, we haven't seen any progress on that to date, but our continuous conversations with the department, as soon as that takes place, we'll then engage in further audits in terms of Department of Health. Rail and other facilities will be our national counterparts in terms of PRASA and Transnet and the repairs to the rail network. Water and sanitation will continue our work in terms of water tankering. And then with respect to the Metro and Umgeni Waters, to look at the repairs they are doing to the infrastructure, to ensuring that there's a permanent solution with respect to people having access to water. So those are the initiatives we're currently busy with, and it'll fall into our next reporting period, which will most likely be the PFMA GR, where these findings will then be shared with you at that point in time. You can move to the next slide. The next slide speaks to the accountability ecosystem. And as we move with our new strategy of Culture Shift 2030, and that is to shift the public sector in terms of accountability, taking responsibility, and how we move forward to ensure that the citizens and the impact on the life of the citizens is enhanced. So the message here is government as a whole, national, provincial, and local, have the ability to respond to a disaster? How quickly do they respond to that disaster? And what are the controls in place to ensure that there's no mismanagement or abuse of any of the funds that is spent? So sharing this slide with you is to say that as SCOPA and the portfolio committees, you also have a role to play in terms of ensuring that there is an adequate response to disaster, and also the controls in place, and there is reporting. If there were certain budgets prioritized, set aside in terms of disaster response, did the departments then spend according to that, and how are they reporting with respect to that spend? And are we seeing people that were adversely affected by the floods receiving the relief that was promised at the end of April? So that's to share how everyone fits in: national, provincial, municipalities, and also the oversight committees have a role. And there was the role played by the Provincial Disaster Management Center or Committee, and the oversight committees will also have a role in terms of the findings that we will share with you today. We can move to the next slide. So here it's just to briefly take you through the details. I think that there has been, since this report was made public and tabled by our Auditor General, there has been a lot of media articles with respect to this, and there would have been aspects shared with you via the departments. So I'm going to start with the good news in terms of what we found. Here we said there was establishment of oversight committees. We reviewed their terms of reference and will provide insights in enhancing and strengthening them. National Treasury provided early guidance on available funding sources and reporting requirements. There were pre-audits of procurement processed by the KZN Provincial Treasury, and it also led to non-compliance being prevented with respect to irregular expenditure. Combined assurance approach followed with internal audit in KZN, identifying similar findings as the Auditor General. Payments withheld where quality issues and risk have been identified. So here departments held on to payments until they were satisfied the findings we raised were addressed. And so sometimes there may be orders that were approved, but the payments may have taken longer based on these quality checks. Social relief system and processes responded well to the disaster, and there's a positive response to our findings on delivery. We will closely track implementation of our recommendations. So in terms of our discussions with both honorable MECs as well as HODs, there was an appreciation and appetite for the findings that we shared, with also firm commitments to ensure that these are then addressed as well as further findings prevented. In terms of summary of the findings, delivery failures as a result of inadequate project management, so things were taking too long. Impact assessments did not enable appropriate planning and response. Ineffective monitoring of contractors and the quality of goods and services they delivered. We found this at both human settlements with respect to the TRUs as well as the mobile classrooms. Overall response too slow compared to the planned milestones. So we know that the floods happened in April with further flood damage in May, and yet at the end of July, as you saw with the TRUs, there wasn't too many that had been delivered at that point in time. Procurement, instances of non-compliance with requirements, potential unfair processes, and disparity in pricing for similar services. Some of the findings were similar to those reported on COVID-19 response. Our conclusion, government is not well prepared for a disaster, from the impact assessment to delivery of relief. So this is applicable to the period April to end of July. Compromised control environments, pre-existing system and process deficiencies, and intergovernmental fragmentation, weakened delivery and even the best disaster response plans. Impact, residents and businesses in the affected areas continue to suffer hardship 3 months after the flood with little relief. As I said, this is a reflection till the end of July. But what we are saying in our conclusion that without the three spheres of government working hand in hand seamlessly, even though the best plans were there, they were not able to then give relief to the affected communities. We can move to the next slide. With specific reference now to the delivery of water via the water tankering services, there was a few things that we noted. One, there were delays experienced in water supply, poor coordination and integration between National Department of Water and Sanitation, the provincial government of Kokta and eThekwini Metro in ensuring that there was adequate tankers and that these tankers were monitored to ensure that the affected areas received water as they should have in terms of a proper plan for monitoring the delivery of the water. No comprehensive needs assessment in terms of just assessing which were the areas most affected and should have received water first. Poor condition of the tankers. We noted that some of the tankers that were delivering water either had the lids open, leaking pipes, and in some areas we actually found the water that was finally delivered to the communities was dirty. So, the whole thing was water is essential to people's survival, and we need to ensure that water does reach them. And we did have the resources in terms, there was about 108 tankers that was available to the province. However, we weren't able to ensure that people receive water timelessly. The water was received in a good condition. So these were the issues that we picked up. I am doing a high-level summary, and the detailed findings we also have available should the committee want us to give them access to those detailed findings. Move to the next slide. In terms of human settlements, in terms of the sample and what we found in terms of the physical site visits we did. So I'm just going to start with the summary. 4,983 dwellings were reported as destroyed. So this was the assessment completed by human settlements together with communities, ward councillors, CSOs to say these are the houses or the dwellings that were destroyed, and obviously the replacement and housing people would then be that number. 254 TRUs were built in 11 districts, and we did a sample of 30, which comes to each one cost 75,000. So the audit was 2.26 million that we're looking at for the 30. So here in terms of a summary, the department did not timelessly assess and validate homeless households as beneficiaries for TRUs, nor improve its project management process to expedite the construction of TRUs in line with targets and the approved specification and quality control measures. So I think I'll just unpack that. What we found was that 4,900 was the dwellings destroyed. There was a list created by human settlements where they had to validate who then qualified in terms of receiving a TRU. So that process of just validating who should receive a TRU was taking them a long time. So they hadn't then, in terms of 4,900, I think at the time of us auditing, there was only about 1,000 people that had been validated. So I think it's on the next line where 1,197 were only assessed for then qualifying for a TRU. And of the 1,197, only 254 had been built and delivered, yet there was a timeline for end of July to actually deliver 1,800. So it just shows that we had 4,900 at the end of July. We said we would deliver 1,800, but at the time of the audit, only 254 of the 4,900 was delivered. So I'm just trying to create or paint a picture of the slow response by government in terms of assessment of who qualified. Then once you've made that assessment, actually delivering a TRU. That was the first finding or the first aspect with respect to human settlements. The next one was when we actually inspected the TRUs, there were some quality aspects that we did note. These were made available to both Honorable MEC at the time, as well as the HOD, and we did get commitments from management in terms of, one, improving capacity to address the shortfall in the assessment, and the other was the commitment to address the quality defects that we did note with the TRUs. Just to explain the little pic that we've included in here, it's to show the site where the person's dwelling was actually destroyed, and next to it was placed the TRU. And then this was done in April, but when the additional rains came through in May, when the team had gone there, they found that the area was very much waterlogged. So again, a TRU is placed in an area that may be not viable for someone to live for a few months at a time. And I think a few nights ago, there was quite heavy rain in Maritzburg. I'm not sure about Durban, but we had quite heavy rains, and all of us, all my colleagues, we all had the same thought. Is there going to be further flood damage in terms of areas that haven't been quite addressed? And if you take a unit being placed in an area already compromised, would that unit still be there? So that's just demonstrating where the TRU was placed, the area was waterlogged. And then some of the response by management was they would contact the service provider and ensure that drainage was put in so that water would find a way to move. And we know once water stands, there's a lot of damage that's created by it. So again, it's a high-level summary of what we found with respect to human settlements, and the detailed findings we can make available to the members. We can move to the next slide. With respect to Department of Education, here the assessment was 356. 356 schools were damaged in KZN. Repairs have not yet started, so that will be in phase 2 of what we're going to start looking at currently based on the spend by the department. 46 mobile units were planned as interim relief, with 53 completed. We selected 15 mobile classrooms costing about 250,000 each, and one mobile kitchen costing 187,000. So in terms of the cost of what we audited was about 3.9 million of that 18 million that the department was to spend on mobile classrooms. Here what we found in terms of the assessment, one of the sample of mobile classrooms selected, we did note that and it shows in the picture that we've included as well, is that the area where the mobile classroom was placed was not solid ground. And if there was any further rains or other contributing factors, it could impact on the stability of these mobile classrooms. And we must bear in mind that the mobile classrooms is to house students, children, and we have to ensure their safety at all times. So those were the issues when the teams did site visits. There were quality defects noted with the mobile classrooms. The ground in which the mobile classrooms were placed were not adequate. And then also the needs assessment in the particular school visited, it was found that the building, the ground level was flooded, but levels 1 and 2 were also not stable. Yet the students of that school were still expected to occupy 1 and 2, which there is the risk of the building in terms of the damage of the ground floor, then meaning not stable enough for the students to occupy 1 and 2. And the department should have used the engineers to ensure that they did a proper assessment of understanding, was the building still suitable for children to occupy, and the mobile classrooms themselves, the ground was not solid, and those mobile classrooms could then also pose a risk in terms of students occupying it. Also, the number of students, was the mobile classroom adequate to address the needs of the school where it was placed? So again, a high-level overview of the findings we have on the mobile classrooms. As I said, the site inspections were done, and what the observation was, there could have been better coordination within the department itself in terms of the assessments done, the reports sent through, and the final delivery given to the schools in taking into account what was actually needed by that particular school to then be able to continue to ensure that learners were safely housed while they were in school during those hours. Again, the detailed findings can be made available. Honorable Chair, that is a high-level findings of the real-time audit for the period April to 31 July. As I said, we are busy with SR2, or the second phase of the real-time audit, and that will continue pending the spend on the real-time audit. So there's an MSCOA code that National Treasury is using, And as departments spend and budget according to that MSCOA code is how we are then auditing the expenditure, ring fencing and auditing that expenditure that relates to the real-time flood, as opposed to just normal operating expenditure. On that note, I also want to add that we are also looking at other municipalities, such as the KwaZulu-Natal and Ilembe District Municipality, if there's any spend coming from their side, as well as King Shitswayo. So we will then follow up with the local government sphere as well during our current MFMA cycle for any spend on the real-time audit. There has been some questions and comments from various members, even at the Parliament Portfolio Committee, to say that if we are now 6 months post the flood, is it still a disaster? But we are always guided by national government as well as national treasury, and as long as the spend is against the MSCOA code for the floods, we will continue to audit. But those are those questions that have been coming up, and that is why I said the message for oversight in terms of strengthening oversight is about government's response to disaster and what do we do and how do we ensure that the people that were most affected do find the relief that is required. Honourable Governor, I will pause then, and my colleagues and I are then prepared to take questions in terms of the concerns that the members would like to raise.
Thank you very much, Marusha, and I think both presentations have been quite informative, and obviously we will get the detail of individual departments looking at the PFMA outcomes when we have our SCOPA hearings in October. But we must also thank you and your team, both nationally and provincially, for looking at the real-time audit, of the expenditure of flood relief funds, because this has been a pretty sore point, both within government, because there have been all these stories about money available, money not available to the province, but also the importance of actually seeing that these funds are used to assist and to mitigate the effects of the disaster that occurred. So I think that has been a very important, your contribution through the auditing will assist us a lot. Colleagues, let me open the floor to you. Please indicate by show of hands. If I don't see your hand, please just call out so I know who is there. I know some of the colleagues are on audio, so please call out. Honourable Nkosi, I'll take you first. Is there anybody else? As I say, please, Honourable Zulu, you'll follow Honourable Nkosi. Anybody else? Okay, because I can see hands, but I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone. All right, let's take the two of you and then we'll go to the rest. Honourable Nkosi, followed by Honourable.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. I hope I'm audible. I'm having a network problem where I'm working from. Do you hear me, Honourable Chair?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, no, there are only two things that I want to raise very briefly. The first one, I would want to welcome Nomalungelo M. I couldn't pick up the surname very, very well. I'm just looking at there, and we congratulate her for her appointment. And we hope that she is going to continue working with us so well. We are very fortunate that since 2011 or so, we have had the female business unit leaders. So we really hope that Nomalungelo is going to work well with us as the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. The second thing that I want to comment about, I want to thank AGSA for giving us this briefing. We are getting the picture, but as you have indicated, Honourable Chairperson, whenever we are going to have an engagement with a specific department, we are going to get the briefing from them, and then it assists us a lot so that we have got the sharp-pointed questions on the issues that we identify arising out of the audits. But I think that the HSA will continue scrutinizing everything so that we move towards clean governance in our own government. And I also feel very much happy that the issue of irregular expenditure seems to be decreasing as it is indicated in the 2021-2022 financial year. Because this is what we are not going to compromise as oversight structures. We are going to bulldoze the government departments to comply with the pieces of legislation. So those are the comments, Chairperson, that I wanted to make. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks, Honourable Nkosi. We'll go to Honourable Zulu and then Honourable Rogers.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. Bear with me of the poor network and also the noise that you will find on the background. There is a challenge, of course, of network. But let me echo also my same sentiments of welcoming the report from the HSA and also congratulate the lady that has just come in to replace the one that has just left for UK. We welcome you and we are hoping for the best of you when working with the standing commission. Chair, bear with me also. I had a problem of audio while there was a presentation that was continuing, but there was a slide, the first slide of transport. The other one is also get whereby there is an irregular expenditure regarding the 3-year contract, which was not properly regulated. Maybe if they can give me clarity on that one, I couldn't hear it very well. I don't know whether, but if the presentation will be forwarded to us, that first presentation, then I'll be covered, because I'll be able to read it and understand it. Thank you so much.
Before I go to you, Honourable Rogers, I must say, Honourable Zulu, these presentations have been emailed to us. So just check on your email, all right? Honourable Rogers?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation.
Francois, you're going to have to shout.
Can you hear me?
You are very faint.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Just try and shout a bit. I'm not sure whether your sound on your device is lower.
If I put my camera off, is my sound any better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. All right. Let me leave my camera off. Thanks, Chair. Just two simple questions. One, and they both around the real-time auditing on the flood expenditure. The figures that were given on expenditure on the various provincial departments, is the AG in a position to tell us whether that expenditure and the budgets allocated to those departments are in fact from reprioritizing provincial departments? Is there any funding from national government to assist those departments? I'm sure the members on the Finance Committee know why I'm asking that question. And then lastly, Chair, just on the TRUs, the AG has done an assessment on the 30 TRUs, an average cost of 75,000 Rand. And the AG just give us an indication, is that within the budgeted amount per TRU, just so that we can get an idea of what's going to be the overall cost in that project. Thanks very much, Chair.
I see the hand of Honourable Stephen Mudley. Let's hear what you have to say. And can the colleagues who have spoken lower your hands, just so that I don't get confused? Honourable Mudley.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson. Chair, I just want to clarify. I heard in the presentation that contracts are being awarded to people that are scoring low. I just need clarity on that. That is from the Department of Transport. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Mudli. I think what was said was that the issue that was being raised is that, as you say, it wasn't necessarily low, but it wasn't those whose contracts were not awarded to those who had the lowest offers or something to that effect. So basically, it wasn't a fair process. But if there are no other hands, let me just make some comments and then we'll hand over to the Office of the AG. I think that this real-time audit is really useful for us. And I would like colleagues from the different departments to follow up on them, specifically on health, because as you can see, the issues being raised around health are current, and we'd like those to be dealt with. COCTA, the issue of water tankers is a big issue, both because what has been highlighted here is the condition of those tankers, the frequency of the distribution of water, the quality of water, and various other issues. And then for human settlements, I think it's the issue of the TRUs. One, the number of TRUs that have been constructed as opposed to the need, 254 to 493, it's quite a gap. Secondly, the quality and the use of it. And then in terms of education, the fact that there are incomplete units, I saw on one of the slides, the point was made as well that the units are not even being used, the location of those units, all those kinds of things. And then I think also a heads up for COCTA is that there are 3 possible audits coming up with KwaZulu-Natal, Lembe and King Tetshwayo, so that would be useful. Let me hand over to the team from the AG's.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. If I may ask Marusha to address the real-time audits responses, and then Kabiso will just confirm on the items asked around transport. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you to Paul Nomalungelo, and her surname is Mkhize, so it's Mrs. Mkhize. Just in terms of the comments made, Honourable Nkosi, thank you for those, appreciating the work done by the Auditor General, and we are with you in terms of ensuring non-compliance and irregularities decreasing, and I think this is an area in terms of the accountability ecosystem where all role players have a role in play. Honourable Zulu, the transport query will be addressed by my colleague Kabiso. With respect to Honourable Rogers on the expenditure reprioritization, so obviously there was consultation with National Treasury and they had to approve the reprioritizations, but it was provincial budgets with respect to both COCTA and human settlements where it was reprioritized in terms of the spend. For the TRUs as well as the water tankering. The Department of Water and Sanitation had also assisted with water tankering, but they came out of their national budget. So I think national departments used funding from their budget, provincial departments from reprioritizing their funds, and where municipalities were involved in the case of eThekwini, it came out of their budget in terms of providing that water to the communities affected. So it was a reprioritization within each entity's budget. If I can give clarity with respect to that, the TRUs, that amount is fixed. It's fixed by National Human Settlements, the 75,000, and that is the amount that is paid for each TRU. So I hope that provides clarity on that. So that's why the SEM process around it was not an issue, but it was then the quality and where the TRUs were placed was the findings, as well as Honourable Governor stressed, the lack of progress in terms of the number of TRUs that was made available. Again, the transport question will be addressed by Kabiso, and Honourable Chair, as you have clearly highlighted, those are the departments that I think maybe as part of their briefing for the scope of hearings, can also then touch on the progress they've made with respect to the findings we've already raised with them and the areas that they need to ensure better service delivery as they move forward with respect to the flood spending. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, Marusha. Kabiso?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Zulu, I think your question was around the awarding of contracts that did not score the highest point. I think, honorable members, what we had said is that Angiti, when you do assessment of the suppliers, you find that in terms of the calculations, you're supposed to award to the highest scoring bidder. But in this case, we found that the suppliers that were awarded are not the ones that scored the highest point. And in addition to that, what had happened was the ones that were subsequently awarded had even higher prices in terms of compared to the ones that had scored high. Basically, if you look at slide 20, we indicate that there's a likely financial loss of 246 million. So basically, this is a trend to transport. Basically, sometimes they don't follow the prescripts or the legislation, which says based on this calculation, because there's a number of items that you need to consider when you're calculating those points. But in this case, we're saying there was a likely financial loss of 246 million because of the fact that they awarded someone who even charged higher, but did not score the highest point. What the department did was they appointed a supplier trying to ascertain whether they were fair. But unfortunately, it seems the scope of that investigation, we did not agree with it. So what the department had promised is that they'll go back and reassess again. So they are still reassessing. So that is one of the material irregularities to transport. I hope, Honorable Chairperson, I did cover. My colleagues will assist if there is something around transport that was left out. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kabiso, and I must also commend you on being suitably attired for Heritage Day. We appreciate. Colleagues,
thank you, Chairperson.
Does anyone wish to add to what Kabiso has said? Are there any? This is Nomalungelo. Did you want to say something?
No, Chairperson. I just wanted to say that I think Kabiso has covered the items. I think the detail on the contracts in terms of the irregular expenditure, as indicated by yourself, Chairperson, is the presentations have got the detail around even the contract numbers and those that were awarded. And I think, Chairperson, if I may, at this point, just to thank the warm welcome from the members of the committee. It is truly appreciated by myself and also from the members who are noting that there has been ladies at the helm. I do promise to do a great job at that and also continue to work with the committee going forward. Chairperson, I think also one of the areas that I would like to highlight when you speak about coordinating and coordination from all departments and the various spheres of government and ensuring that service delivery happens, and in particular with regards to the flood relief. We are going into a rainy season yet again in KZN. Well, we hope that climate change hasn't disrupted what we generally know as the rainy season. But some of the items that have come up around the construction of the TRUs
And as you've fairly indicated, that the numbers in comparison to what should have been already on the ground by now are very low. But in addition to that, when you speak to coordination, is that on the findings you will see you have a TRU, but then people are connecting themselves electricity, so there is then that lack of coordination or that seamless coordination in that where there should be a TRU, then there should be services in terms of someone connecting electricity to those TRUs in the proper manner, because it also poses further danger to those that are residing in those TRUs. Marisha did mention that one, they are built on sometimes already flooded or potentially to be flooded. So you've got a waterlogged units, and then you illegally or inappropriately connect electricity, exposing wires and the like. It's really a recipe for disaster, and it could set the province back yet again in then trying to deal with those occurrences, should there be those. So I think when we mentioned with regards to coordinating ministries, but also just coordination amongst departments and the various spheres, whether it be the municipalities as well in providing the services required. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Nomalungelo, and I must say, I was a bit sexist. I just commented on Kabiso, but both Marusha and Nomalungelo are looking really lovely. Anybody wishes to add? Okay. Is that Honorable Majola? Okay. Colleagues, if there are no other issues, I don't see any other hands. I think colleagues from the ages.
I think, Chair, I think Honorable Majola wants to speak.
Okay, Honorable Majola, come in. This is the chairperson of the Health Portfolio Committee. Honorable Majola. She's on mute. If you can unmute Honorable Majola and come in. I think she's not speaking, Kabo. Maybe you can speak to her offline and see what's going on, because I did hear her voice. But in the meantime, let me just say, just so that members from the AG's team will understand, we will be internalizing this. We know that we are going to be interacting with these departments in the forthcoming SCOPA hearings. So clearly there will be more questions then. But I do want to voice my concern about both health and transport, because this has been going on for a good few financial years, and it seems like we aren't really coming out of it. I understand the qualification on asset management for health, but that's not a new qualification. As I recall, it was a previous qualification as well, one of the areas. But for me, it's the issue with health of the records management system, which is a long-standing issue, and we've been told at various points, by different by the MEC, that there's an electronic records management system in place. It's being piloted. I recall that it was being piloted in 1 or 2 sites. We don't really know what's going on, but we will follow that up when we have the hearings with them. And I'm glad that the health chairperson is here, because I know she is very, very concerned as well. On transport, I think the irregular expenditure, here again, we must say that as SCOPA, when we've raised it, we were told repeatedly that there were processes for a service provider because of the sheer volume of the transactions. A service provider was to be appointed, etc., etc. So we will chase up on that as well. There is a newly appointed chair of the Transport Portfolio Committee, and we'll make sure that the chairperson is brought up to speed. Honorable Majola, are you now back?
Sorry, ma'am. No, she says she's covered, ma'am.
Okay, fine. All right. Okay, colleagues, if there are no other issues, then what it would be is for me to thank the team from the AG as well as the representatives from the SIU. I'm glad you are here as well, because there are issues that you would be covering as well. Thank you very much to all of you for attending. Thanks to the team from the AG for your very good presentation. We certainly will be using it. We aren't asking the questions now, but let me tell you, we're reserving the ammunition. So you will hear the questions coming up as we go through our hearings. Thank you very, very much, everyone. The meeting is now closed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. And my dogs behaved very well today.
I think all our dogs did.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.